Hi everyone, Ben and I are back with you again. This time we're talking about animal mutilations. What are they? Well, they're the killing and mutilation of animals under unusual and pretty grisly and usually bloodless situations, and with anomalous circumstances. And these have been happening worldwide for, I think they were first logged in the 70s. And worldwide among sheep and horses and goats, cattle and pigs and rabbits, dogs, bison, deer and elk. And I believe for a while, cats were found mutilated in the UK sometime. I vaguely remember those reports in the late 90s, which is bizarre. But those bodies are mutilated with bloodless excisions, where usually an ear or an eyeball or the jaw flesh, the tongue, the lymph nodes, genitals and rectum are removed. Absolutely bizarre, wouldn't you say, Ben?
Yeah, it really is. It's a most perplexing phenomena, and I've actually have read about it occurring a lot earlier. There's been reports from 1606 in England.
Ooh.
Yeah, so going back, 500 years or so, that sheep were found, and up to 100 sheep in the areas around London were found when only the fleece and the carcass was left behind, and only the tallow and the innards was actually taken from the sheep.
Oh.
And it actually was taken that seriously that it was reported in the records of the courts of King James I.
Oh, wow.
At that time, that these sheep had been killed under mysterious circumstances.
Yes.
in England. So, and those reports continued steadily through to the 19th and even into the 20th centuries.
Mm.
So, but at that stage, I think you'd say that it was still really just sporadic reporting. Back in those times, whereas from the 70s onwards, it became the focus of a major FBI investigation in America, and it really got a lot of coverage, and a lot of investigators went out and they found bang, 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 all these cases that had been occurring.
Yeah.
So in modern times is when it's been absolutely into the public's consciousness.
Yeah.
That was the case. Yeah.
There's been various explanations that have been offered about, what's causing it, ranging from, the animals just die and there's natural decomposition, predators. And I remember reading in some of the late 1800s, early 1900s news clippings that there were animals were found, but they were found like ripped apart, like there was predation that had happened. And so they didn't really fit under the umbrella of, these animal mutilations that are the phenomenon of what we call animal mutilations, but more like predators. So you can easily tell the difference. But some of them, like some people have offered that they're like results of satanic rituals, secret governmental and military agencies doing something with them, cryptid predators like the chupacabra, which we heard a lot of some years ago, and that's the animal that's said to exist in parts of Latin America, I think it was, where they supposedly attacked animals and especially goats, and I think they were all referred to as bloodsuckers from those times too. And of course, extraterrestrials were blamed as well, purely due to the circumstances surrounding animal mutilations, where sometimes lights are seen in the sky near the location of where the animal's found dead later on. So
Yeah,
go on.
Yeah, that's very it's very interesting. And of course, one of the other hallmarks is the fact that these carcasses are often left by predators. They're not actually, so the foxes and the rats and the ants and everything won't actually eat what's left of these carcasses. And they've also described as having a strange smell as well, sort of like it's been described as a medical smell in that area, which perhaps you might say government agencies. But what I question about government agencies is, why can't they just buy their own cows?
Yes.
You know, like that's what I really question with government, with it being a government agency based thing. I mean, the American government, Australian government, any government can go buy a lot of cows, you know, without any questions being asked at all. You know, so you know, so I do. So why would they go and invade private property and you know, cows worth $1,000 or more? You know, why would they deprive farmers of that under those circumstances? And you're right about, you know, like mysterious strange lights are often seen either in conjunction to or the night prior to a mutilation event occurring. So and you got to look at cults too. I mean seriously, cults. You look at the spread of cattle mutilation, you know, even in Australia, which we know a little less about, unfortunately. But in America, you know, it's been over a wide period of time in a wide geographic area, all states. How many cults could there possibly be out there? Certainly, some of it could be satanically related, but I tend to think they tend to go for more cats and dogs rather than, you know, horses and cattle. You know, I can't imagine a bunch of black cloaked individuals strolling across a paddock with an inverted cross trying to kill a bull. You know, like it's, you know, there's enough to it that sort of, that perhaps, you know, while there's, you know, government agencies and cults may be explainable in some circumstances, I don't think you can slap that band-aid onto it and call that the total, you know, the total explanation. And of course there could be multiple explanations.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's true. The most curious thing about animal mutilations for me is how in many cases, not all, but many cases, that the blood is completely missing from the animal. It hasn't drained around, out on the ground around where the animal's found. Often when the animal is found, there's no signs of a struggle on the ground around the animal. So it's like it's actually been placed there, killed somewhere else, but dropped there. And that's where the whole extraterrestrial connection to the UFOs comes in, isn't it? Because people say we can't find any footprints, any signs on the ground around the animal going out meters, many meters, that anyone's been there, that the animal struggled, nothing like that. So where do they look? They look up, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, they go, well, maybe. And that's where we get this classic image of a classic disc with a beam of light and a cow going up underneath it, isn't it? I've actually got a soap dispenser like that. Did you know that? I should have brought it here.
Oh, it's such a classic, iconic image. It really is. You know, the Frisian cow in a beam of light heading up to a green light heading up to a classic flying saucer. And the other thing to remember too is that cultists wear shoes. You know, is that government agents wear shoes. So you know, so you can't leap to conclusions about anything at all. But when you look at some of those pointers that indicate that there's no footprints around the animal, either of the animal's own footprints or of predators or of humans around it, and the thing's just basically there it is with nothing around it. It does really sort of the only one that comes to the fore then is extraterrestrial interest, and that kind of makes sense to me too. It makes more sense to me because, you know, they would come and steal someone's cow and probably don't view it as stealing, but like they would come and take the cow and they might really enjoy eating the lips or whatever it is, or maybe they use it in some other way that we obviously don't know. But it kind of fits more logically to me. than someone going to a remote farm. I can't see cultists and even government departments necessarily going out to these remote farming properties in Colorado or Oregon or in New South Wales or Queensland, even here in Victoria. It just seems that all seems a bit far-fetched to me as explanations.
So the next question for me is, like, the blood's drained away from the animal, drained out of the animal, completely drained out in many cases. It's not there, it's just missing.
Yeah.
Where does it go? And exactly what is it used for? And I agree with you. I think it's possibly, not probably, but I tend to lean more towards the extraterrestrial intervention hypothesis in regard to animal mutilations, because there are so many unanswered questions around it that are all these other things that we're talking about, like cultists and predators, natural death, etc. They don't fit the other aspects of it, where, if it was a predator, again, you would see signs of the animal struggling. You would see bits and pieces of the animal's body here, there, and everywhere.
Exactly.
And we don't have that. So now I do remember during the peak of the animal mutilations that there were cases where animals were found with a fluorescence that could be determined on their bodies. So if a black light was shone over them or something like that, there would be a fluorescence like they were marked, which I always found really interesting. I never found any great explanation for that. I didn't see that go much further. But I do know that various, particularly in the United States where they're highly prevalent, that a lot of the police officers got involved in those investigations as well. So I don't remember reading any of the final reports that they made, except just scratching their head and going, we don't know. We just don't know. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that is the case. They simply don't have an explanation for it.
Yeah.
What do you say to angry ranchers and farmers that that are losing $1,000 cow every time it gets killed? What do you say? And these guys, they patrol their properties and they know what's going on. The other interesting fact about mutilated cattle is that they're often around 3 to 4 years old. So it's not like they grab old cows or even young calves. They're going for cows that are in their prime, which you would say a 4-year-old cow would have to be regarded as being a fully developed and young beast, not a baby and not an old age cow. So I thought that's interesting as well when they looked at the stock that's being killed.
I think the other thing that sort of connects in some researchers' minds that this is related to the UFO phenomenon is that over the years there have been handfuls of animals found in trees. There was one well-known case, I can't quite remember where it was, but it was in the United States, where a deer was found very high up in a tree. And I do believe that some people have actually seen animals being pulled up from the ground, but I don't think that there's a lot of them. But and I think that's why people have tended, when they heard those cases, they tended to go, that's definitely not from here, or actually, could it be some sort of, and what would the reason be? But if it was our own technology that was moving those animals, dragging them up into the sky, what would be the point? What would they do with them, and what would be the point, and why do that unless they were trying to lead people to believe it was related to the UFO phenomenon?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the animals are often isolated, like you say, in a tree, or in if they're on the ground, then the other animals aren't around them. So that animal is always isolated. It's not sort of around the other creatures. And often in strange locations, and even to the point where the most famous case of all is that of Snippy/Lady the horse, which was in 1967 in Colorado. That's the most famous. That started the whole thing, and the media sort of dubbed the horse's name Snippy, but that was actually its mother's name, and the horse was named Lady, and she was a 3-year-old Appaloosa. didn't come home from the range when they were out feeding during the day. Didn't come home, and the next day the ranch owner went out, and it was actually his sister's horse, and he found it, and she'd been stripped from the shoulders straight through to the head. Nothing, and the bones are a bleached white color, like it's been laying out in the plains for years. Very strange. And the horse had been galloping, and it was found, and the gallop point stops, and then a further 100 meters is where the horse is actually found.
Mm-hmm.
So the tracks end here, and the body's over here. So really weird stuff. And there was a flattened bush, and there was marks in the ground around that site. And I haven't found photographs of all that, but I had a bit of a snoop around to see what I could find online. And that kind of really was the case that started the whole modern era.
Mm-hmm. Actually, there's been a case in Queensland in the last few years, and you may have been going to talk about this, but I know you've got one to talk about in your area too.
Yeah.
Where it was about a decade ago, where graziers Nick and Judy Cook began finding dead cattle on their remote cattle station. I think it was about 14,000 hectares or something like that, just northwest of Mackay, where the animals had been found with inexplicable injuries. So they were working on their property when Mr. Cook noticed a dead cow carcass, which appeared to have had its body mutilated, with its entire udder, ears, and tongue removed. Actually, at the time, they didn't think much of it, and they just left it. But over the years, since then, they've found about 15 animals on their property that have been mutilated in a similar way. Now, those people who watched the recent documentary with Ross Coulthart called The Phenomenon, with the Australian investigative journalist, now Ross Coulthart was said on that documentary that he was told by a veterinarian about a cow that was found dead in a field, and when he moved the two stomachs to get to the third stomach, he discovered that the third stomach wasn't even there, that something had actually removed it. And I found that very interesting. And in that documentary as well, actually, the former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Chris Mallon, he went on the record on that documentary saying that animal mutilations are real. Make of that what you will.
Well, yes, I suppose that we say that, yes, they certainly are real, because in fact, it's probably one of the most realest things we actually have, because you do have a carcass that is there that can be looked at. I think another important thing too is when is the carcass actually discovered? Is the carcass discovered that day, the next day, a week later, 3 months later? I mean, that has a big bearing on things as well, like the blood, no blood. And I think that was interesting about about the missing stomach in the cow, is that you could not possibly remove that stomach without there being liters of blood in the immediate area. So that's you sort of go, well, that's a really interesting point, that that blood would be everywhere, and to say, well, in high desert areas in like Colorado, New Mexico, that the environment can dry the blood out. There are physiological reasons to explain why there's a lack of blood, but I don't know. I think that they either can cauterize it in some way, or they're taking the blood. Who knows? And to what depth and how thorough have post-mortem studies been done on these bodies as well? Possibly in America, but in Australia, it's a different story. You just don't have the records of it. I even went to the Department of Agriculture trying to see what I could find on their website about cattle mutilations, and there's absolutely zero on that site about this as a phenomenon. So and look, you might be able to do FOIs with them and things like that if you really wanted to, and I'm sure somebody probably has undertaken that process here in Australia. But I haven't had the time. There's a lot of things I say I'm going to do, and invariably never get around to actually doing them. So
I know there's so much to do. There's so much to investigate, so much to look at. It's unbelievable. But we've got some cases to talk about. So do you want to start off with the case that you've
Yep.
Being reported to you.
Yeah, in 10 years of UFO investigation, I've never ever had two things being reported to me, and one is being a trace case, landing case, and the other being a cattle mutilation case. So I was absolutely fascinated to see that that we actually had a case reported to us, and that was amazing. I've not had that in all that time. So, so anyway, so this guy contacted me and he said it's I was out walking on my neighbour's property, and it wasn't me. So it's not my property, and I was out just doing my neighbour was away, so I thought I'd go out and walk around his property. And as I was walking around his property, I found this lone cow laying on the ground, and the cow was dead. And the guy who found it is actually a doctor. So he's he would be fairly credible in looking at what he's found. Not just
something's dead.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, he's not just some guy who's just wouldn't really know what it was, But he said, look, this thing. He said I was puzzled when I saw it laying there, and he said I noticed that it had been cut out around the mouth, and that the rear area has been removed, and that it's actually a very sharp and clear linear style cutting around where it was, and the cow was up on the top of a hill, and where it is in northeast Victoria is actually quite a hilly area. So he said to walk up there takes a bit of effort, and it's actually the cows are a considerable distance away from the farmhouse, his house and the neighbour's house. So, and this is all during COVID, of course. And it's for me to go there is a 4 to 5 hour drive. So there's that. There's COVID restrictions. So there was absolute, and the other complicating factor is that it's not his cow and it's not his land. So all of that thrown in together has meant that I've had to look at it from afar, which has been a little bit frustrating, and it'd be lovely if it occurred a bit closer to home, where we have plenty of cows. So that was the thing. So anyway, he said to me, look, I'll see if I can get you some soil samples. And I thought, well, that'd be really great if you could do that. I wasn't going to ask him to start cutting cows and things like that. I mean, it's not his cow. It's just a whole minefield of not being able to do it. But the interesting things about this particular case is that there's this apparently healthy cow of a youngish age, that's been, well, not young but mature cow. It's dead. It's in an isolated location. There's been no sign of anything around it. He didn't notice any tracks around the cow, as in like dog tracks or fox prints or rats or anything like that. So that all stands up to me as being classic indications. He thought the cow might have been dead for a week. That was his impression. And when you look at the actual photographs, you can see that where the cuts are, it's not exactly like fresh pink or anything like that at all. It actually has darkened off around the mouth area. So it looks like it's dead, as in like reasonably fresh, but not as in he discovered it in terms of it being the very next day. So I thought that was, but he's discovered it not too long after. And the thing hasn't really deteriorated in that time frame either. So either through, the temperature at this time of year is it's not hot, and it's not really fly season either. So it's not infested with flies. It's basically just sat there for, presumably a week. But at this point in time, that's an unverifiable fact, and you really would need a veterinarian to look at it. And this is over a month ago now, so it's probably just bones and jelly that are there now. So it's kind of like you had an opportunity. It's like a once in a lifetime opportunity, but no actual way of getting to the location. But another interesting thing was he told me that when he told the owner had said he had another cow. And he described what had happened. He said he had another cow die in a similar circumstance. So I thought, that's interesting too. Like, it's not just a one-off event. He's had another cow die like that.
Can I ask how many, do you know how many cattle are on that property?
I think there would be, from what I can gather, there's probably like 100, 150 cows. So a reasonable herd in that area. It's a very, very green and lush area, perfect for raising Herefords. It's an ideal area. And the gentleman who found it said to me that he'd spoken to other neighbours around, and they just said, no, it's just predators. Like, it's just simply predators that have done that, and wouldn't even entertain the idea that it could be anything unusual. But I thanked him and said, thank you for coming forward and letting us know that you've found it. Thank you for perhaps considering it to be strange in the first place, and being confident enough to report it to somebody. And he's reporting it to a UFO organisation. If you told the Department of Agriculture, would they really care? I don't think you'd really get much out of them. Maybe if it was a whole paddock of cows, that would perhaps be a bit more dramatic. You might find something in that situation. So at this stage, it obviously remains a mystery, but that's the first Victorian case that I've had, and that's in the year 2021. About a month ago. So, and I'm sure there are other cases out there.
Yes, that gentleman must have been aware of animal mutilations and possible link to the UFO phenomenon to contact you in the first place.
Absolutely, he was. He was aware of that, and had a bit of knowledge about it. And he said, I can send you some photos. And I said, yeah, sure, send me some photos. And he sent the photos, and I just thought, wow.
Yeah.
When I saw the photos, I didn't. You've seen the photos. I didn't think that the photos looked anything like it was just purely a natural explanation. You can see those classic hallmarks of the sharp cut marks around the mouth, and it's not just some butcher who's gone up there with his knife. Around the tail area where that's been cut out, it's been cut out in what you'd call a meaningful way. And I don't know of a single predator that can remove anything like that, And of course, things like ants and flies and rats and all those things, bugs of all descriptions, will descend upon a carcass and just start ripping that thing to shreds. And in no time at all, they actually do disappear. So but these cows, these horses, these dogs, cats, whatever, they're shunned by the garbage cleaners. They're not ever approached again. So there's something around those carcasses, and this carcass in Victoria was obviously under the same situation.
Yeah, fascinating. Hey, very strange. Yeah. And I do wonder why there are fewer cases in Australia that are reported than other places. I was about to say, is it because Australia is so vast and not heavily populated in those particular areas? But you could say the same thing about locations in the United States, couldn't you?
Absolutely. I was recently in New Mexico and Arizona, and they're big, open expanses of area, and you don't have to go far to be by yourself. So yes, both countries are very, very similar. If you think of a place like Germany, France, or Spain, or somewhere like that, and if they've got, which is much more densely populated, and any sort of paddock is valuable land over there. So you sort of go, well, there must be cases in those countries as well.
Yes. I was involved with a case. I didn't look up the date. I didn't go back through the records, but it was in the late 1990s. Well, a lot of things were going on through that decade.
Yeah.
But I went out to a property in the north of Brisbane, which has since been built out, but at that time it was a 5-acre bush block with a house on it, close to the front end of the property. So most of the bushland was down, right down the back, the full 5 acres behind the house. Anyway, the people who involved had called me and reported seeing lights in the sky the couple of nights previous. I went out there with a colleague, and we sat and spoke to them for about an hour and a half. And I'm sorry, I'm just going off memory now because it's going back quite a while. But during that conversation, the owner said that they had found a dead chicken down the back near where the lights had been seen. And so they'd gone down there the next day after they'd seen the lights the night before, and they found the chicken. And the chicken had been, he described it as being turned inside out and the full skeleton removed, absolutely removed. Now, I've had a chat with you about this previous to recording, and I didn't see the chicken because he had dogs, and he told us that he had dug a very, very deep hole to bury that chicken carcass so the dogs would not dig it up. Now, I find that interesting because, one, he must have had concerns about whether if the dogs ate that particular chicken, because dogs are scavengers, they'll eat anything, especially if they've been raised in that sort of situation. And it became very obvious to me that he did not want those dogs to have access to that chicken. Now, I didn't ask him to dig it up because it was like feet. He was talking a few feet deep. So, and it didn't click to me until I spoke to you recently about this, that he must have had a concern about his dogs eating that particular chicken. But anyway, the bottom line is that the whole skeleton was missing. Not just, it wasn't ripped out, it was just gone, he said. And it must have been cut from here to here for it to be able to be turned inside out, at least the torso, the body part, obviously not the wings of it, because it is just body, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I found that really, really interesting because I hadn't heard anything like that before.
I can't imagine skinning a chicken. How do you do that? Like, how do you pull it in? Yeah, how do you pull it inside out? And it sounds like a rather brutal maneuver.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like something that you could do with any finesse and ease. It would be a fairly, to try and separate a chicken from its structure.
Exactly. Yeah. Flesh from carcass, from skeleton. Unusual. Not sure how that would happen from the bones. So that was a really interesting situation, that one. There were other things going on. They had seen lights a few times, on the property, but down back, because the property was slightly sloped. It wasn't completely flat. It was slightly sloped. So you went down the back towards a lower area. There was no gully, but it was like slightly curved down the bottom of the property. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And when you look at animal behavior when UFOs appear, it usually is panic.
Yes.
If you read a lot of UFO reports and animals are involved, animals are invariably barking or mooing or squawking or whatever they do. They are usually upset by something that's strange in the environment. Like dog will bark at a helicopter, and cows might move away, but this is generally more. They tend to have a greater sense of panic.
Yes.
And they could be sensing things that we don't sense the craft could be emitting some type of pulsing sensation that interferes with them on any of a number of levels that humans don't quite are affected by. So it's hard to imagine any animal standing around waiting to be turned inside out.
Yes. Actually, there was another case that was reported to me. I did not investigate it because by the time they reported it to me, it had happened like when they were in their childhood. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a historical case, but a woman called me, oh gosh, must have been about 10 years ago. And she said that when she was a child, she was living in the southwestern suburbs of Brisbane. And at that time, it was just all bushland. And the kids used to walk through this one particular paddock to go to school. And one day there was a group of kids walking through there like they normally did, going to school. And what they did was they came across in the paddock, they came across this area which was circular and flattened, but like a double ring, like a donut shape, okay? And the middle was still standing. And she said it was really, really strange because what they could see was what they recognized, some parts of it were small animals, like they had been put through a bit of a grinder and sprinkled over this circular shape in the grass. Circular world shape, by the way. And so there were bits and pieces that they could recognize, like, you know, like lizard, like blue-tongued lizards, birds. They weren't big animals, she said, possums, some foxes, things like that. And anyway, so they went to school. They thought they were very, very strange. And that night, what happened was they came home. She came home from school, and during the night, they had animals because they were on a larger property as well. They had geese, they had horses, they had dogs and cats. And she said, and there are other animals too, I can't quite remember now, maybe some ducks as well. I don't think they go well together with geese. But anyway, it was something like that. And she said in the middle of the night, they all started, the dogs started barking, the horses started neighing, the geese went nuts, the local birds in the trees, she said it was like daylight had come and they suddenly all woke up, right? And they just went crazy. And the parents were outside trying to calm down the horses, thinking, what the heck's going on? What the heck's going on? Anyway, eventually they all settled down again. And so the next day they went to school, and she was telling her friends, and this is children in primary school, right? So we're talking up to the age of 12. And I think she mentioned she was something like about 10 years old at the time. Anyway, she was talking to her friends, and apparently the same thing had happened to the other kids in their locations as well, that all the animals during the night had gone crazy, just lost the plot. So something was in the area, right?
Yes.
Now, here's animals that, now, whether there are a lot of animals in that paddock and maybe a spaceship came down and landed on it and it was still like underneath was swirling around, whatever, I don't really know. Whether the occupants of that, if there were occupants, had collected those animals and for some reason created a grisly mess with them and just dropped them on the ground, I don't know. But it was the most bizarre thing I had ever heard.
Yeah, that's extremely bizarre. And I almost take option one, that it landed on them.
Yes. It makes sense.
That's, to me, makes the most logical sense.
Yes.
You know, and the other, so that's, you know, that's in that particular instance. But when you look at what they're taking from any animal, it is always soft tissue matter. Like, they're not taking hooves. You know, they're not taking the tails. The tails are generally left behind. They're not taking bones. They're not taking, it is invariably soft tissue that is being removed, whether it's a cat, a rat, a dog, a cat, or a horse or anything. It's always the soft tissue that's been taken. Why?
Yes. What is it about the soft tissue around the mouth, the udder, the rectum, the I said the udder, the ears.
The ears, yeah.
What is it about that tissue that seems to be significant?
You know, it could be they like to eat it. It could be they use it for medicinal purposes. It could be that it has some protein or other ingredient that they need for some other purpose. You know, it could be simply be scientific collecting. By a range of different species, potentially, you know, like, you know, so once the greys have come down and taken a cow, they don't really need to grab another one, do they? So unless it is like they need it ongoing, rather than just a one-off sample that we can label that this is a cow, that's a thing. So it has to be serving some ongoing need. And the other question I asked too is it a flat-based thing? Is it sporadic, or is it occurring continually? And it's just, you know, what's the actual, or like UFO phenomena in general, does it rise and fall across the decades?
And is it evolving?
Yes.
That's another thing. Like the UFO phenomenon, it seems to be evolving.
Mm.
How has it evolved? I don't hear a lot about animal mutilations these days coming out of the United States. That doesn't mean that they're not happening. It just means I'm not hearing about it. That's all.
Exactly. If we have any viewers from the United States who might be plugged into what's happening over there, by all means, send us a message and let us know. So, and there's another darker side of mutilation too, is that there's been human reports.
Yes.
So, humans have been found with similar things done to them as well, that have been found down by a bridge or whatever, and it's not necessarily a spooky serial killer that's done it, and people who have been taken all together and never seen again.
Yes.
So
there was another case I wanted to talk about too. Now this is a third-hand report. It was a gentleman who called me. He was up in Cairns, and he was in a hotel one night, and he was talking to an Indigenous man there who was from the Cape, and the North Cape in Australia. And the Aboriginal man was telling him that there was a certain place in North Queensland where they had seen mutilations of kangaroos. And it was in an area where the Aboriginal people would not go. They believed that it was, bad spirits in that area. But there were certainly kangaroos that had been mutilated as well. What's that about? I don't know. See, this is the thing about Australia, is most of our population lives along the coastline. So we have really no idea what's going on out in the middle of the country where there's no populations, except on some occasions where some of our Indigenous people are moving around there.
Exactly. Or you might have some station hands who drive for 3 days from one end of the property to the other and come across something, but maybe they don't come across it as well. So, it's only if you find it on the usual route that you used as you drive around a station. You don't just crisscross the whole thing, they've got set routes that they take. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to come across something.
Yeah.
And what about fish?
About fish, yes.
What about ocean living creatures, as in dolphins and whales and sharks, etc., and down to the smallest little minnows? That's another realm that's almost impossible to know unless it's found on a beach somewhere. And if it was found on a beach, they're probably going to say that again, predators did it.
Well, the interesting thing is that many of the animals that these experiences happen to are mammals. They've got horses and goats and pigs, cats and dogs,
humans.
Yeah. Cattle. They're all mammals. So perhaps it's got something to do with that particular, species of animals, all the mammals. I don't know.
I haven't read about too many bird reports either.
No.
But that's not to say that birds aren't. A bird's probably an easy catch for a UFO. You just open up a little door and in it goes. So they're fairly easily caught. But possibly birds, possibly all species, to some degree on planet Earth have been in some way, investigated, taken for a whole range of reasons. And while the mystery continues, we'll keep on looking into it.
Yes, we will.
It's
There's one more case I'd like to talk about.
Yep.
And it was back in I think it was when the P&O cruise lines were coming into Australia, but I think it was back in the 70s, 80s. It wasn't in recent years, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember the decade, but to feed all the passengers, they used to run cattle on large pieces of land in North Queensland. And this one particular station started reporting cattle mutilations, that their cows are being found with bits and pieces of them missing, like we've been talking about. Anyway, they didn't know what was going on, so they had external investigators come in to have a look what was going on. But they never actually came to any resolution about it, just that it was happening and they didn't know why, but exactly the same types of injuries to the animals, being found dead and with those particular parts of the body missing. Yeah, that's a bit of an obscure case. I'm still digging around trying to find more out about that.
Well, that's an interesting case, isn't it? Being reported like that and having external review is really, really, really quite interesting. Yeah. And like a lot of farmers, they won't really call anybody anyway. So the true depth and scope of the let's call it the problem is probably not truly known. Is he going to call the vet out? Well, the vet's going to charge him $150 an hour to come out and have a look at a carcass. So there's a disincentive there to do that. Is he going to call the police? Well, they do call the police, and the Cook family did up Cloverley near Mackay. They called the police, but the police said, look, unless you catch the guy in the act, there's nothing that we can do for you anyway.
Yeah. So
who are you going to call, when you do have this sort of thing occur? You're probably just going to put it down to, well, it happened. It's just another one off the balance sheet. And you move on, So, and then people don't want a whole lot of attention around their properties, generally speaking, anyway. You don't need, gumshoe spectators turning up to have a look at your farm or whatever and encroaching on your property. So, so the reports, while they do come out, and we're always very grateful when we see something come in, like a lot of things, it may not be getting fully reported.
Yes. And I also think that people, I think that a UFO organization will be the last place that people would report these, because they don't make that connection.
Yes.
I think that farmers would first off think, oh, that's predators. Unusual because they're going for this part and the udder and the rectum and all sorts of stuff. But they wouldn't necessarily relate it to the UFO phenomenon.
No, and he might ask his neighbour.
Yes.
Did you have something strange happen? He went, yeah, well, I did too. Or no, mate, I didn't. It's just predators. And then that's probably about really nearly as far as it goes. The majority of the time, and even if you do ring the police, for one cow? Would you ring the police for 5 cows? If you did ring the police and they did come out, they're going to say to you, what can we do?
Exactly.
You're going to stake out you can have a stakeout if you like and sit in the paddock and wait all night long for something to happen. But like all these things and these phenomena, it doesn't happen like that. You can't sit there and wait for a cattle abduction to occur.
Yes.
You could sleep for a month of nights in that paddock and nothing will happen. So it's only ever going to happen when there's nobody around. That's the other guarantee with it.
Yeah. I think if you had a large cattle station with thousands of cattle and perhaps, a few hundred cattle were all found like that at once, then I think there could actually be a deeper police investigation and a possible stakeout, or at least putting cameras on the property. But it would have to be something quite significant, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it is. The ones usually solo numbers or maybe 1 or 2 over consecutive nights or something, but it's not normally a mass event like that. And you're right. That's what it's going to take to get that sort of reaction. To make the Department of Agriculture interested in it. To get the authorities interested. That's really what it would take. And we haven't really seen that occur.
No,
or certainly not in any recent times at all.
Well, not in Australia anyway.
No, that's right. Big place, and it's so stay tuned, viewers.
Yes, but if anyone does know of anything like this in their area, which may have happened even on their own property, please let us know. We would love to know more about that, because we rely on people reporting these events to us. We have no way of knowing that they're occurring otherwise. So feel free to post something in the comment, or you can actually send a message to us through Strange Encounters Downunder Facebook page as well. just let us know what's going on. Or even if it's your grandparents who said something strange happened on their property, if they'd lived on something, or even around the city, I don't know. These things could be happening in the city and we're just not fully aware of it. Who knows?
Exactly. If your cat disappeared under strange circumstances or you found your cat inside out, we want to know.
Poor cat.
And it's true. Like, I back that up, Sheryl. Like, you know, an old report, a new report, you know, break the silence.
Yes.
Even if you don't think it's significant, we want to know about it because it might be significant to us and to other people that are interested in these matters. And like all things strange, we are definitely interested in it.
Yes, very much so. So please contact us and let us know about it. So that's it for us again for another episode. So join us again next time with Ben and I come back, and we will be talking about something else that is strange down under.
See you soon.
Okay. Bye, everyone.